Christmas has always been a complicated season for me. For many, it's about joy, warmth, and family gathered around the tree. For me, though, it was a test of patience, of pretending that everything was fine, when deep inside, I could sense the cracks forming in the lives of those I loved. That year, snow fell heavily outside my window, blanketing the streets in silence. I had just finished decorating a small tree of my own, nothing extravagant, just enough to remind me that even when life gets messy, tradition still has a place. My daughter, Emily, had called me a week before, her voice cheerful but tight, as if she was holding something back. "Mom, we'll be spending Christmas at Daniel's parents' house this year," she said. I had forced a smile into my voice, replying, "Of course, sweetheart. That's wonderful." But the truth? My stomach twisted. I knew Daniel's family well enough to understand what that meant for Emily. They were wealthy, old money, the type of people who measured worth in pedigrees, careers, and dinnerware. I was never enough for them, and neither was my daughter, not in their eyes. Still, I told myself, maybe this year will be different. Maybe love would triumph over arrogance. Maybe Emily would finally be embraced as a true member of their family. When Christmas Eve came, I decided to surprise her. I didn't tell her I was coming. I knew she'd insist I didn't, worried about how her in-laws would react. But I couldn't bear the thought of her spending Christmas surrounded by people who looked at her as though she were an intruder in her own marriage. So I bundled myself up, tucked a small wrapped gift into my bag, a necklace that once belonged to my mother, meant for Emily, and made my way to Daniel's parents' estate. The house was enormous, glowing with lights strung across the roofline, a massive wreath hanging from the double doors. Through the frosted windows, I could see shadows moving, laughter, glasses clinking, the sort of celebration that photographs well for holiday cards. I knocked softly at first, then a bit louder when no one answered. Finally, the door creaked open, and there she was, my daughter, Emily. But instead of the warm smile I'd expected, her eyes widened in shock, almost fear. She was wrapped in a thin cardigan, her arms crossed tightly around herself as if she was trying to hold in her own shivers. "Mom? What are you doing here?" she whispered, quickly glancing over her shoulder. "I wanted to see you," I said, stepping forward. "It's Christmas." I thought. Before I could finish, I heard it. Laughter, loud and booming, coming from the living room. Daniel's parents, Daniel himself and his siblings all sat comfortably around a grand fireplace, sipping wine, plates of food balanced on their laps. Emily's lips trembled as she tried to explain. "Mom, please, they don't know you're here. I couldn't." And that's when I noticed it. Her hands were red and raw from the cold. Her cardigan looked too thin, too old, while everyone inside the house was dressed in cozy sweaters and soft cashmere. She hadn't been given a seat by the fire. She hadn't even been offered warmth. My heart stopped. My daughter, the girl I had carried in my arms, the woman I had raised with love and sacrifice, was shivering alone in the hallway, while her husband's family laughed without her. I froze. A chill ran deeper than the winter air outside, because in that moment, I realized, my daughter wasn't part of their family gathering. She was an outsider in her own home, a guest who wasn't welcome. And I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. I stepped closer to Emily, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "Sweetheart, why are you standing here? Why aren't you with them by the fire?" Her eyes darted toward the living room again, as though she were a child afraid of being caught doing something wrong. They don't like it when I sit with them too long," she whispered. "Daniel says I should give his parents space. They want the family close at Christmas." I frowned, my heart tightening like a fist. "But you are family." Emily's lips quivered, and for a moment, I thought she would collapse right there in the foyer. She leaned against the wall, trying to look composed, but her shaking betrayed her. "They don't see me that way," she said finally, her voice breaking. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't just a mother visiting for Christmas anymore. I was a witness to my daughter's humiliation. I brushed past her gently, ignoring her protests, and walked toward the living room. The sight that greeted me made my chest burn with anger. The Daniels, as they liked to call themselves, were gathered like royalty in front of their roaring fireplace. Daniel's father Richard sat in a grand armchair, a glass of brandy in hand, while his wife Catherine perched elegantly on the couch. Daniel himself lounged nearby with his brothers, laughing at some story. Not one of them looked toward the foyer. Not one of them noticed Emily standing cold and alone, until I stepped in. The laughter dulled, then stopped altogether as heads turned toward me. The warmth of the fire didn't reach the chill that spread across the room when they saw who had entered. Catherine was the first to speak, her voice sharp as a knife hidden in silk. "Oh, I wasn't aware we were expecting guests." Emily hurried in behind me, her face pale. "Mom, please," but I raised my chin. I couldn't let Christmas pass without seeing my daughter. I thought she'd be surrounded by love and warmth. I see now I was mistaken. Richard gave a small, forced smile, the kind businessmen wear in meetings they can't wait to end. "Of course you're welcome," he said, though his tone dripped with insincerity. "But Emily should have informed us. We do things rather formally here." Formally. The word stung. Was my daughter supposed to schedule affection? Daniel finally stood, though reluctantly. "Mom, maybe you should have called," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. I turned sharply to him. "And maybe you should have noticed your wife freezing in the hallway while you sat laughing by the fire." The room went silent. Catherine's painted smile faltered. Richard cleared his throat. Daniel's brothers shifted uncomfortably. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't move, didn't speak. She looked trapped between the family she married into and the mother who had always fought for her. I stepped closer to the fire, the heat biting my cold skin, and looked around the room. Christmas isn't about brandy, fireplaces, or appearances. It's about kindness, about belonging. And yet, my daughter was left standing in the cold while the rest of you celebrated. Catherine's voice sharpened. "Emily knows her place here. She doesn't need to insert herself where she isn't. Her place," I snapped, my voice rising. "Her place is at her husband's side, in the warmth of his family's love. If that's not what she has here, then maybe this isn't her family at all." Emily gasped softly, and Daniel finally looked at me. His expression was caught between shame and anger, as though he couldn't decide whom to defend. But I didn't wait for him. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small wrapped gift, the necklace from my mother. I handed it to Emily, ignoring the watchful eyes around us. "This," I said, my voice trembling with emotion, "is from your real family. From the women who came before you, women who knew how to give love without conditions. Women who never would have let you shiver at Christmas." Emily's tears finally fell. She clutched the gift to her chest, as though it were the only warmth she had been given all night. The Daniels exchanged glances, their silence louder than any insult. Catherine pursed her lips. Richard stared into his glass. Daniel looked at the floor, and I knew then, they weren't going to change. But something in Emily had. I could see it in her eyes as she looked from them to me. For the first time in a long time, I saw not just my daughter, but a woman realizing the truth of her own worth. And I silently vowed, if she couldn't find love and belonging in that house, I would help her find it somewhere else. That night, long after the fire had dimmed and the Daniels had retired to their bedrooms, I found Emily sitting by the small window in the guest room they had begrudgingly offered me. She still clutched the little wrapped box I'd given her, though she hadn't opened it yet. The moonlight illuminated her face, pale and tired. She looked older than her years, as if the weight of her marriage had carved lines of sorrow across her features. I sat beside her. "Emily, tell me the truth. What's happening here?" For a long moment she said nothing. Her fingers played with the ribbon on the gift, pulling at it and then stopping, like a child afraid of what they might find inside. Finally, she whispered, "You shouldn't have come, Mom. It's worse when you're here." Her words cut deeper than any insult Catherine had thrown at me earlier. "Worse?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "Emily, are they hurting you?" She shook her head quickly, almost too quickly. "Not like that, but they don't want me to be part of them. Daniel says I embarrass him. His parents think I'm beneath them. Everything I do is wrong." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she buried her face in her hands. My heart twisted. I reached out, gently pulling her hands away. "Sweetheart, you've always been more than enough. You're kind, thoughtful, strong. If they can't see that, it's not your fault. It's theirs." She let out a broken laugh. "You don't understand, Mom. Daniel doesn't defend me. He joins them. He says I don't know how to act in higher circles, that I talk too much, dress too plain, laugh too Ooh loud, he says I should learn from his mother. Her voice grew bitter. From the same woman who left me outside shivering tonight. I felt a fire rise inside me, hotter than any flame in that grand fireplace. How long has this been going on? Emily's eyes glistened in the moonlight. Since the beginning. I thought it would get better. I thought if I tried harder they'd accept me. I ironed his shirts the way his mother likes them. I memorized which fork to use at their dinners. I even dyed my hair lighter because Daniel said his family preferred it. She gave me a hollow smile. Do you know what Catherine said when she saw me? At least now you don't look so much like your mother. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. They weren't just trying to erase Emily's spirit. They were trying to erase me too. I grabbed her hands, holding them tightly. Emily, listen to me. You don't have to prove anything to them. You don't need to become someone else to be worthy of love. If Daniel can't see the treasure he has, then he doesn't deserve you. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she shook her head. It's not that simple, Mom. I'm trapped. The word echoed in the room like a bell tolling doom. Trapped how? I asked softly. She hesitated, her shoulders trembling. Then, with a deep breath, she whispered, Daniel controls everything. The money, the house, even my phone. He says it's for my own good. But really, it's so I can't leave. Her confession sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't just about cold shoulders or cruel words anymore. This was about control, about power. I cupped her face in my hands, forcing her to meet my gaze. Emily, you're not trapped. You have me. You'll always have me. If you want out, I will help you. Tonight. Right now. Panic flickered in her eyes. She pulled back slightly, shaking her head. No, Mom, please. If I leave like that, he'll come after me. He'll come after you. You don't know what he's capable of when he feels humiliated. Her words hung heavy in the air. I thought back to Daniel's pale face at dinner when I confronted him. He hadn't defended Emily, but he hadn't defended his parents either. He had looked cornered, afraid even. Something told me there was more to this story than Emily was letting on. Sweetheart, I said carefully. Has he ever hurt you? Emily hesitated, then shook her head. Not physically, but sometimes words cut deeper than fists, don't they? I nodded, my throat tight. I wanted to scoop her up, take her home with me, shield her from every harsh word, every sneer, every cold shoulder. But I also knew she was terrified. If I pushed too hard, I might lose her trust. So I sat there with her in silence, holding her hand until the trembling stopped. Finally, I reached into my bag again and pulled out another small box I had brought with me. This, I said, pressing it into her palm, isn't just a gift. It's a key. Inside is a prepaid phone and some money. If you ever feel like you can't breathe, if you ever need to run, you call me. No matter where you are, no matter what time, I'll come for you. Emily looked down at the box, then at me. For the first time that night, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. She hugged me tightly, whispering into my ear, Thank you, Mom. You're the only one who sees me. And in that moment, I knew. I couldn't just leave her here to suffer. Something had to be done, something bigger than whispered promises in the dark, because if I walked away, I might lose my daughter forever. The next morning, the Daniels household looked like something out of a magazine spread. Silver trays of pastries, steaming pots of coffee, and polished china filled the long dining table. Catherine presided at the head like a queen on her throne, while Richard buried himself in the business section of the paper. Emily sat quietly, her eyes cast downward, pushing food around her plate. Daniel, Eve, the dutiful son, laughed at his mother's anecdotes and reached for the pastries as though nothing had happened the night before. But I saw it. I saw the faint tremor in Emily's hands, the way her fork clinked nervously against the porcelain. I saw how Daniel never looked at her directly, as if her presence embarrassed him. I cleared my throat. Emily? Did you sleep well? Her head jerked up, startled by the sound of my voice. Catherine's eyes narrowed immediately. Yes, Mom, Emily said softly. Thank you. Catherine leaned forward, her voice dripping with disdain. She sleeps fine. We make sure of that here. Don't worry yourself. The condescension in her tone made my blood boil. But before I could respond, Richard folded his paper and asked Daniel about a deal his company was making. Within seconds, the table was abuzz with business talk and Emily disappeared again. Invisible, ignored. I couldn't stand it anymore. So Daniel, I said, breaking into their conversation. Do you plan on inviting us to church tomorrow? It is Christmas weekend after all, or is that a special people-only event too? The room went silent. Catherine's fork clattered against her plate. Emily's eyes widened in alarm. Daniel froze, his mouth half open. "Mom, please," Emily whispered under her breath, her hand reaching for mine under the table. But I didn't back down. Catherine recovered first, her lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Church? We attend a very exclusive service. I'm afraid there wouldn't be room for outsiders." "Outsiders?" I repeated, my voice steady but cold. "Funny. I thought Emily was family." Catherine's smile faltered. "Of course she is," she said too quickly. "But traditions are traditions." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. Traditions should unite a family, not divide it. For the first time, Daniel spoke up. "Mom, let's not." But Richard cut him off, his voice sharp. "Enough! This is not the time for dramatics. We've been very generous to Emily, haven't we? Paid for the wedding, helped with the house, made sure she has everything she could possibly need. Generous." The word rang in my ears like an accusation, as if Emily should be groveling at their feet for basic decency. I turned to Emily. "Is that how it feels, sweetheart? Like they've given you everything?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she stayed silent. Her silence told me more than words ever could. Richard snorted, clearly irritated. "She knows her place here. Don't stir up trouble." "Her place?" I repeated, my voice trembling with fury. "Her place is not at the edge of a fire while everyone else basks in warmth. Her place is not to be silenced at her own dinner table. Her place is not to be treated like some charity case when she has given her heart, her loyalty, and her very life to your son." Daniel's face paled. Catherine shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Emily's hand tightened around mine, as though drawing strength from every word I spoke. I stood slowly, pushing my chair back with deliberate force. "You may see her as less than. You may think she should be grateful for every scrap of attention you throw her way. But let me remind you, Emily is my daughter. She is loved. She is valuable. And I will not sit here quietly while you chip away at her soul." The silence was deafening. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to pause. Then, unexpectedly, Daniel spoke, his voice low, strained. "Mom, Dad, stop." Catherine turned to him, her face twisted in disbelief. "Daniel, no," he interrupted, louder this time. His hands clenched into fists on the table. "She's right. Emily deserves better than this." For a moment I thought I had misheard him. Emily's eyes widened in shock, her lips parting. Catherine's face flushed crimson. "How dare you take her side against us?" Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood. "Because she's my wife, and I'm tired of pretending everything is perfect here when it isn't." The crack had appeared, a fissure in their flawless facade. Richard slammed his hand down on the table. "Sit down, Daniel. You're making a fool of yourself." But Daniel didn't sit. His voice shook, but there was steel beneath it. "No, Dad. You've made me a fool long enough. I've let you control everything. My career, my choices, my marriage, but not anymore." Catherine's jaw dropped. Richard stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. Emily whispered his name, her voice trembling. She looked at him like he was a stranger, but a stranger she had long prayed to meet. And me? I just sat there, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. The cracks had begun to show, and once they did, there was no turning back. Daniel's words hung in the air like thunder rolling before a storm. His defiance stunned the room into silence. Catherine blinked rapidly, as though trying to process what she had just heard. Richard's face twisted with rage, his knuckles white against the polished table. I could almost hear Catherine's carefully constructed world cracking at the seams. For years, she had orchestrated every detail of her family's image, her control absolute, and now her son, her golden boy, was standing up to her in front of everyone. Catherine's voice, usually smooth and commanding, cracked as she spoke. "Daniel, sit down. You don't know what you're saying." But Daniel's eyes, once clouded with hesitation, now gleamed with clarity. "I know exactly what I'm saying, Mother. Emily is my wife, my partner, and I've let you treat her like a servant, like she's never enough. But I can't keep watching it happen." Emily's lips parted, her breath shaky. She looked as though she couldn't decide whether to cry or smile. For months, maybe years, she had endured in silence. And now, finally, Her husband's voice had joined hers, shattering the loneliness she'd carried. Richard stood abruptly, his chair toppling backward with a crash. The sound echoed like a gunshot through the dining room. He leaned across the table, his face red with fury. Ungrateful boy. Do you know what we've done for you, for her? Without us, you'd have nothing. No house, no job, no name worth speaking of. You think you can bite the hand that feeds you? Daniel flinched, but he didn't back down. Maybe I don't need the hand that feeds me anymore. Catherine gasped as if he had struck her. Daniel! But he pressed on, his voice louder now. I've been living in your shadow my entire life. Every decision I made was because of you. You didn't just help us. You controlled us. You used money as a leash. And I let you. But no more. Emily squeezed his hand, her eyes wide with disbelief and awe. She whispered his name like it was a prayer. Richard's laugh was harsh, cruel. You? Stand on your own? Don't make me laugh. You don't even know the first thing about surviving without us. You're weak, Daniel. Always have been. That's why we stepped in. The words sliced through the room like a blade. For a moment, I saw Daniel falter. The little boy inside him flinching under the weight of his father's contempt. I leaned forward, my voice steady, anchoring him. You're not weak, Daniel. You're strong for finally standing up. It takes courage to break free. Catherine turned on me, her eyes blazing. Stay out of this. You've poisoned him against us. I shook my head slowly. No. You did that yourself. By forgetting that love isn't control, and family isn't ownership. Emily, her voice trembling but resolute, finally spoke. You've humiliated me, belittled me, treated me like I don't belong. I've stayed quiet because I didn't want to cause rifts. But I can't do it anymore. I am not just a wife in name. I am Daniel's partner. And if you can't respect me, then maybe you don't deserve to have us in your home. The room froze. Even Richard seemed stunned by her sudden boldness. Catherine's mouth opened and closed, no words forming. Richard sneered, recovering first. You'd walk away from all this? From comfort, wealth, reputation? For what? Pride? Emily's chin lifted, tears glistening in her eyes. For dignity, for peace, for love that isn't conditional. The crack had widened into a chasm. Richard's face darkened further. You think you can survive without us? Do you even know how much of your life we've financed? The house you live in, the car you drive, the very bed you sleep in, all of it is ours. Without us, you're nothing. The words hung heavy. My stomach turned as I realized the depth of their control. It wasn't just emotional, it was financial. They had built a gilded cage around Emily and Daniel, and until now, neither of them had dared to rattle the bars. But Daniel squared his shoulders, his jaw set. Then we'll start over. We'll figure it out on our own. I don't want to be owned anymore. Richard's laugh was a cruel, hollow sound. You'll come crawling back. You always do. Emily spoke softly but firmly. Not this time. The silence that followed was deafening. The air itself felt charged, as though lightning might strike at any second. Finally, Catherine rose slowly from her chair. Her composure cracked, her hands trembling as she gripped the table for support. Daniel, don't do this. Don't throw your life away. Don't throw us away. Daniel's voice broke, pain etched into every word. You already threw us away when you decided control mattered more than love. Catherine's lips trembled. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not fear of losing control, but fear of losing her son. Richard, however, stood rigid, his face carved from stone. He would never yield, never admit weakness. To him, love was a transaction, a debt to be collected. And in that moment I realized the truth. This wasn't just a battle between parents and children. It was a war between two versions of family, one built on control and one built on love. And only one would survive the night. The storm of words had left the room raw and hollow, like the silence after thunder. Everyone sat frozen in the aftermath, Emily clutching Daniel's hand, Richard standing rigid, and Catherine staring at her son with wide, tear-glazed eyes. Then Catherine whispered something no one expected. Please, don't leave. Her voice cracked on the word please, a word I doubted she had spoken in years. Catherine Montgomery did not beg. She commanded, yet here she was, trembling, her power unraveling thread by thread. Daniel shifted uneasily. Mother! Catherine stumbled around the table, her composure gone. She reached for her son's arm like a drowning woman grasping for a lifeline. I can't lose you, Daniel. You don't understand. Everything I've done, everything I've controlled, it was for you, for this family. If you walk out that door, it all falls apart. Richard scoffed, his voice sharp. Catherine, enough. He's made his choice. If he wants to crawl into the gutter with her, let him. Catherine whipped around, her eyes flashing with a mix of rage and anguish. Stop it, Richard. Don't you see what's happening? If he leaves, if they leave, it's over. Everything we've built, everything we've protected. Her words trailed off, choked by sobs she tried to swallow. Emily, still trembling, spoke softly. Protected from what? The question hung heavy in the air. Catherine froze, her lips pressed tightly together. Her hands shook as she wrung them nervously. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she whispered, from the truth. Everyone stared. Even Richard's expression faltered. Daniel's being on. Rose furrowed. What truth? Catherine turned away, her back to us, her shoulders hunched as if she carried an unbearable weight. You were never supposed to know. None of you were. I kept it buried, locked away, but if you're going to walk out tonight, you should at least know what you're walking away from. The room thickened with dread. Emily's grip on Daniel tightened. I could feel my heart thudding in my chest, knowing the revelation that hung in the balance would change everything. Catherine turned back slowly. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes burned with a desperate, almost frantic light. Daniel, your father isn't who you think he is. Daniel blinked. What are you talking about? Richard stiffened, his jaw tightening. Catherine, don't. But she pushed on, the words tumbling out as if they had been caged too long. When I married Richard, it wasn't out of love. It was necessity. Your real father, he was someone else, someone I loved, someone who couldn't stay. Richard stepped in and we agreed. For your sake, for the family name, no one would ever know. The world tilted. Daniel's face went pale, his mouth opening and closing with no sound. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Daniel's voice finally emerged, hoarse and broken. You're saying Richard isn't my father? Catherine nodded, tears spilling freely now. He raised you. He gave you his name. But no, biologically, he isn't. I thought burying the truth would protect you, but it only bound you to us tighter. And now, watching you walk away, she broke off, her voice trembling. I can't keep lying. The revelation detonated in the room. Richard's fury erupted. You fool! Do you know what you've done? He slammed his fist on the table, the sound reverberating like a cannon. Years of sacrifice, of maintaining appearances, destroyed in one breath. Daniel staggered backward, his face aying. Shen. He looked at Richard, then at Catherine, then back again. His entire identity seemed to waver before our eyes. Emily stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. Daniel, look at me. None of this changes who you are. None of it changes the love we share. But Daniel's voice shook with rage and betrayal. My whole life has been a lie. Every choice, every path, all manipulated, controlled. And now this? You kept my father from me? You let me grow up believing. His voice cracked. How could you? Catherine reached out desperately. I did it for you. You needed stability, protection. Richard gave us that. If I had told you the truth, you would have hated me. Daniel recoiled, his eyes blazing. I hate you now. The words cut through Catherine like a blade. She stumbled, her hand covering her mouth as sobs racked her body. Richard's sneer was merciless. See what your sentiment has done. He's lost to you now. And for what? The memory of a man long gone. But I saw something else in Catherine's face. Not just grief, but relief, as though finally speaking the truth had broken the chains of her silence, even if it shattered everything else. Emily wrapped her arms around Daniel, anchoring him as he trembled. We don't need their secrets, Daniel. We don't need their money. We can build something honest, together. Daniel buried his face in her shoulder, his body shaking with the weight of everything unraveling at once. Catherine sank into her chair, broken. I never meant for it to end like this. I only wanted to keep my family together. Richard stood tall, cold, and unyielding. Your family is gone, and you've no one to blame but yourself." The words hung like a death knell, but as I looked at Daniel and Emily, holding each other amid the wreckage, I saw something Richard could never understand. In the ruins of lies and control, something new was being born. Fragile, yes, but real. And that truth, more than wealth or reputation, might be the thing that finally set them free. The storm inside the Montgomery estate showed no signs of passing. The fire in the hearth had burned low, casting long, trembling shadows across the dining room walls. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was Catherine's quiet sobs, muffled into her trembling hands. Daniel stood at the edge of the room, his chest heaving. His world, carefully built on duty, loyalty, and expectations, had just crumbled. He stared at Richard, the man he had called father his entire life, and for the first time, saw only a stranger. Richard, however, remained chillingly composed. His jaw was clenched, his eyes sharp and unyielding. Where Catherine had broken under the weight of secrets, Richard grew sharper, harder. His power was slipping, and he knew it. But he was not ready to let go. "You think this changes anything?" Richard's voice was low, controlled, but venomous. "So what if I am not your blood? I am the man who raised you, clothed you, educated you. Without me, you would be nothing. Do not forget that." Daniel flinched as though struck. "Nothing?" His voice cracked. "I was a child. I needed love, not a ledger of debts. You didn't raise me. You managed me like an asset in your portfolio." Richard's lip curled. "Love is a weakness. It makes men soft. Look at you now. Trembling, emotional, clinging to her." He flicked his gaze at Emily with contempt. "Like she's your lifeline. Pathetic." Emily stepped forward before Daniel could respond. Her voice, steady and strong, cut through Richard's words. "Pathetic is using your child as a pawn to prop up your pride. Pathetic is building a life on lies and fear. Daniel doesn't need your money, your power, or your approval. He has a chance at something you've never known, Richard, a real family." Richard's face twisted, the mask of control slipping for the first time. His voice rose, thunderous. "You dare lecture me in my own house? You, stop!" It was Daniel. His voice was sharp, calm, and filled with a strength that surprised everyone, even himself. He stepped in front of Emily, his posture tall, his eyes locked on Richard. "This isn't your house anymore," Daniel said. "It never was. It's a prison, and I've been chained in it long enough." Catherine looked up, her face blotched with tears. "Daniel, please." But Daniel didn't turn to her. His gaze remained fixed on Richard, steady and unflinching. "All my life, I thought I owed you something. I thought I had to sacrifice who I was to repay everything you gave me. But tonight, I see the truth. You didn't give me anything. You took my childhood, my choices, my identity, and you tried to take Emily too. No more." Richard's hands clenched into fists, his composure cracking. "Ungrateful boy," he hissed. "You'll regret this. Walk out that door and you're cut off. No inheritance, no company shares, no name. You'll be nothing but a beggar." Daniel's jaw tightened, but his voice was calm, resolute. "Then I'd rather be a beggar than your puppet." The words rang through the room like a gavel striking. Catherine gasped, her body trembling. "Daniel, don't. Please, listen to him." But Daniel finally turned to her, his expression softening with grief. "Mother, I loved you. I trusted you. But tonight, I saw what your silence did. You let him shape me into someone I wasn't meant to be, and you let me believe a lie about myself. I don't hate you, but I can't let you hold me here any longer." Catherine's tears spilled harder, and she reached out with shaking hands, but Daniel gently stepped back. Richard, however, was not finished. His voice grew cold, like steel drawn in the night. "If you leave now, Daniel, you'll discover quickly how cruel the world is. You think love will feed you, shelter you? Without my name, no one will respect you. You'll crawl back, broken, begging for forgiveness, and when you do, I won't open the door." Emily met Richard's gaze unflinching. "Then we'll build our own door." For a moment, silence crashed over the room again. Richard's face darkened, but he didn't speak. He saw it, the unshakable resolve in both of them. His control had finally, irreversibly, slipped through his fingers. Daniel turned to Emily, his voice softer now. "Let's go." She nodded, her eyes brimming with tears, but her smile steady. Together, hand in hand, they walked toward the door. Catherine rose suddenly, desperation driving her to one last attempt. "Daniel, please, don't leave me alone with him. I did it all for you. Don't abandon me now." Daniel paused, his back to her. His voice was heavy, pained, but firm. "Mother, you abandoned me the moment you chose secrets over truth. I hope one day you find peace, but I won't find mine here." And then, without looking back, Daniel opened the great oak door. The winter wind rushed in, cold but liberating, sweeping through the suffocating air of the Montgomery estate. Richard stood frozen, his empire of control collapsing silently around him. Catherine sank into her chair, her sobs filling the cavernous hall. And Daniel, with Emily's hand in his, stepped into the night, away from the gilded prison, toward an uncertain but honest future. For the first time in his life, Daniel Montgomery was free. The night air was sharp, stinging against Daniel's face as he and Emily walked down the long gravel driveway of the Montgomery estate. Each step felt heavier than the last, yet lighter too, as if with every crunch of stone beneath his shoes, another chain fell away. Emily squeezed his hand, her voice soft. "You did it. You really did it." Daniel let out a shaky breath. "I don't know if I did the right thing, but for the first time, it feels like it's my choice. Not his, not hers, mine." They reached Emily's car, parked under the naked branches of an old oak tree. Daniel looked back once at the mansion. Its windows glowed faintly, warm against the darkness, but to him, it no longer looked like home. It looked like a mausoleum, full of ghosts of lies and lost years. As they drove away, silence filled the car, not heavy, but cleansing. Daniel finally spoke. "Emily, I don't know who I am without that name. Without all of it." Emily turned to him, her eyes fierce yet tender. "You're Daniel, not Montgomery, not Richard's heir, just Daniel, and that's enough." It always was. For the first time that night, Daniel smiled. A small, fragile smile, but real. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Richard made good on his threats. The bank accounts Daniel had once depended on were locked. His phone buzzed endlessly with messages from lawyers, warning him of consequences for walking away from his obligations. Catherine wrote letters, desperate, guilt-soaked words begging him to return, promising they could fix everything if only he'd come back. Daniel didn't respond. Instead, he took a job at a small architecture firm, one that had once admired his student work before his father had pushed him into the family company. The pay was modest, nothing like what he'd known, but the work filled him with a quiet satisfaction he hadn't felt in years. Emily supported him every step. She sold some of her jewelry, picked up extra shifts, and together they learned to live simply. Meals cooked at home, secondhand furniture, evenings spent laughing instead of attending stiff galas under crystal chandeliers. And though money was tight, Daniel felt richer than he ever had. But Richard wasn't done. One afternoon, as Daniel left the office, a sleek black car pulled up beside him. The window rolled down, and there he was, Richard Montgomery, looking as polished and imposing as ever. "Get in," Richard ordered. Daniel hesitated but opened the door, sliding into the leather seat. The air inside smelled of expensive cologne and power. Richard didn't waste time. "You've made a fool of yourself, of me. You think you can survive on scraps? You'll come crawling back, Daniel. You're my son, whether you like it or not. This world will chew you up without..." Daniel met his gaze, steady. "You're wrong. I'm not your son. I'm Catherine's son. And for the first time, I'm my own man, too." Richard's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with something that looked almost like fear. But he said nothing more. The car rolled to a stop, and Daniel stepped out, closing the door on his father, and on the life he had left behind. Years later, on another winter's night, Daniel found himself by a different fireplace. This one was small, crackling warmly in the home he and Emily had built together. Their two children sat on the rug, giggling as they decorated gingerbread cookies with far too much icing. Emily leaned against him, her hand resting on his. "Merry Christmas," she whispered. Daniel looked around, at the worn but cozy furniture, at the joy spilling from his children's laughter, at the woman who had stood by him when he had nothing. His chest swelled with gratitude. "Merry Christmas," he replied. He thought of Catherine sometimes, and even of Richard. He wondered if the old mansion still echoed with emptiness, if Catherine still cried in the night, if Richard still clung to control even as time slipped from his grasp. But those thoughts no longer held him captive, because here, in this little home, surrounded by love that was real, Daniel finally understood the truth. Family wasn't about blood, it wasn't about money, it wasn't about power. It was about love freely given, without conditions. And that was something Richard could never take away. Daniel kissed Emily's forehead and joined his children on the floor, laughing as they smeared icing across his hands. The fire crackled, the snow fell outside, and for the first time in his life, Daniel Montgomery, no, just Daniel, knew he was exactly where he belonged. And this time, no secret, no lie, no threat could ever erase that.